On this Sunday night, Israel steps up its attacks on Hamas. A defiant prime minister denies it's politically motivated.
I think any country has to defend itself. It has a natural right of self-defense.
Plus, the pressure on the UN Security Council to end the crisis, giving kids their shots.
It will have an incremental benefit on overall slowing down transmission.
The push to get the next generation vaccinated. The aftermath of Liz Cheney's purge and the future of the Republican Party. And eroding employee engagement. Burnt-out Canadians decide to leave the labor force.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Diplomacy appears to be doing little to stop the hostilities in the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu vows to continue Israel's assault on Hamas targets with full force. The Palestinian militant group, which controls the Gaza Strip, remains defiant, firing more than 3,000 rockets into Israel in the past 7 days. And civilians are caught in the crossfire. Palestinian officials say Israeli strikes have killed nearly 200 people in Gaza. Israel reports 10 people killed by Hamas rockets. And UNICEF warns children are bearing the brunt of the violence. At least 58 children are dead in Gaza and 2 in Israel. The United Nations Security Council has met publicly for the first time to discuss the crisis. And as Mike Armstrong reports, there is immense pressure on the international community to intervene. And a warning, some of the video you're about to see is disturbing.
On this, the 7th day of hostilities between Israel and Hamas, there was no rest, instead more death. After another night of bombings, Palestinians searched through rubble, sometimes finding bodies, sometimes wounded. According to health officials in Gaza, at least 42 people were killed Sunday, including 10 children. On the Israeli side, more civilians caught in the middle of this conflict. A synagogue hit by a Hamas rocket, another landed in damaged vehicles, and one set fire to a field. In the neighborhood of Jerusalem that was the flashpoint for this recent unrest, 7 Israeli border officers were injured Sunday when a car rammed a checkpoint. The driver was shot and killed. The moment they were rammed was captured on video. Now, Israeli officials insist their air attacks are aimed at military targets. Overnight, they say they destroyed the home of a senior Hamas leader. It was the 3rd attack going after the group's leadership in 2 days. Israeli Defense Forces also say they were going after a tunnel system used by Hamas forces underground. The explosions and collapse took homes down at the same time. Civilian casualties, they say, were unintentional.
Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
Appearing on CBS Sunday Morning, Israel's Prime Minister said Hamas has fired close to 3,000 rockets at his country. Ending that threat will take as long as it takes.
We're trying to degrade Hamas's terrorist abilities and to degrade their will to do this again. So it'll take some time. I hope it won't take long, but it's not immediate.
The calls to end the conflict are coming from just about every angle. There was a meeting of Islamic nations Sunday. The Pope warned of the conflict spiraling out of control, and the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting. There are efforts by both Egypt and the U.S. to broker a ceasefire.
President Biden spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas yesterday.
Neither side seems to be listening to those calls for calm. One of the leaders of Hamas, speaking in Qatar this weekend, insisted that in terms of missiles, what the world has seen so far is nothing compared to what's hidden. Well, missile supplies appear to be a part of the equation for Israel. An Israeli defense official said a ceasefire now would give Hamas time to recover. Letting it continue firing missiles, he says, would deplete its stockpiles and make it less of a threat for years. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
To breaking news in Toronto, 1 person is dead and 4 others have been injured in a shooting. It happened this afternoon. Officers were called after reports a man got out of a car and began firing into another vehicle. He then ran away. Investigators say there are at least 5 victims. Police say multiple shell casings were found at the scene. Now to the pandemic. Canada is set to receive a record 4.5 million doses of vaccine this week, thanks to more early shipments from Pfizer. And more of those Pfizer doses will be going into younger arms. Several provinces are starting to administer shots to kids 12 and up. But how much of that will it make a difference? Abigail Bimman reports.
I've basically just been waiting to get the vaccine so that I could feel safe going out.
14-year-old Lucas Rubachuk is one of about 100,000 young people in Manitoba now eligible for a COVID-19 jab.
Make me feel more comfortable, but I won't stop being safe around other people.
Health Canada gave the green light to giving children 12 and up the Pfizer vaccine on May 5th. And while all provinces seem to be on board, so far Manitoba and Alberta are the only ones to offer it. Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador will start this coming week. Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia promised first doses before the end of the school year, while the other 3 provinces haven't announced specifics.
Getting that first dose into these teenagers before the end of the school year will allow for, I think, a summer that will be overall safer for these kids to be able to engage in summer camps, sporting activities, and other social activities that really are important to their development.
Vaxxing teens may be too late to have an impact on in-person learning for the end of this school year, but children and parents across the country are anxiously waiting to hear whether summer camp will be on. Ontario's premier gave some vague hope during a visit to a vaccine clinic Sunday.
About the summer camps, July 3rd is usually the time they open. They're opening up this year because of the great work that these people are doing.
While children have largely not become seriously ill with COVID, Dr. Jesse Papenburg says they do play a role in community transmission, especially adolescents.
It will have an incremental benefit on overall slowing down transmission throughout Canada, but it is. I don't think we're going to see a miracle just because we're able to vaccinate 1.3 million 12 to 15-year-olds.
There's also the question of vaccine hesitancy. Dr. Papenburg says he hears concerns from some people ready to get their own shot, but hesitant to give it to their kids. He stresses there are strong global vaccine surveillance systems keeping a close eye on what happens to children, and says Canada will have its own large study watching for any risks. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Medical teams in Ontario are working around the clock to vaccinate adults in hotspots. The province has set up pop-up clinics in the hardest-hit regions. But as Catherine Ward explains, there are questions about how the vaccines will be allocated in the coming weeks.
The 2-week push to send more vaccines to hotspot regions in Ontario has been embraced by people 18 years and older anxious to roll up their sleeves. And in the final days of this provincial strategy, scenes of long lineups have been encouraging signs in the ongoing fight against COVID-19.
The sooner I get vaccinated, the safer I feel.
An all-night vaccine clinic in Peel region, west of Toronto, is one of the most recent success stories as thousands of people turned out. Many who can't afford to wait in line during the day.
This is an opportunity for people in other sectors such as manufacturing and shift work, taxi drivers, truck drivers, and alternate workplaces that just can't come.
Now the question is, what's next for Ontario and how should vaccines be allocated going forward?
The inherent danger is, that there's this fallback just to a per capita allocation and then this stays fixed. That's what we should avoid.
Dr. Peter Uni is calling on the province to be flexible, recognizing the needs will not be the same everywhere.
There will be some hotspots that say we still have enough vaccines and we just need to make sure that we really are able to cover our population in this neighborhood. Others might say it's great if we can continue to have a bit more and that this should probably be individualized.
Other scientists say achieving targets, such as the goal to vaccinate all adults before the end of summer, suggested by Ontario Premier Doug Ford, will also require some creative thinking to ensure no one is left behind.
So we need to have these multi-pronged approaches in order to get that 75-80% capacity.
We'll need to look at alternative strategies. So for instance, going door to door might not be as efficient, but it may be a more effective way to reach certain people.
Because the worst case scenario would be having doses and medical teams at the ready, but no arms to jab. Catherine Ward, Global News, Toronto.
India's latest wave of COVID-19 cases is showing signs of cresting. But the country's mounting death toll has led to an unsettling situation. And some of the video you're about to see is disturbing. Hundreds of bodies have turned up in the famed Ganges River. Poverty and fear of the disease are likely reasons why people have disposed of remains in waterways. Crematoriums have been overwhelmed, and there's a shortage of supplies for traditional funerals. India's neighbor, Nepal, is seeing an alarming rise in COVID-19 cases. In the last 24 hours, more than 7,300 people in that country tested positive for the virus. It's believed the surge is partly due to cross-border travel between India and Nepal. And as Redmond Shannon explains, Nepal's healthcare system is not prepared for the pandemic.
A nation gasping for oxygen. But this is not India, this is Nepal. The country on the roof of the world is the size of the Maritimes, with a population of almost 30 million. Its daily case numbers threaten to surpass anything Canada has seen. Its health system is underfunded by any standard, even compared with its struggling neighbour, India.
Our hospital has just four ventilators. The doctor, anesthesiologist who operates that ventilator is also infected and is symptomatic. He helps us on call and by video he helps us and we try to help the patients.
Dr. Rosan Chaudhary says all his critical care beds are full.
We have 54% cases have tested positive. That's good. The graph is rising every day.
It's believed part of the reason for this current wave is migrant workers returning home from India after lockdown layoffs, bringing the virus back with them. Nepal's vaccination rate is currently around 7%.
The cases are still going to rise, and as the cases rise, already our death rate is going up.
A political crisis isn't helping. The current Prime Minister lost a confidence vote this week and is acting as caretaker leader until a new government is formed. He has pleaded with the G7 nations, including Canada, to send aid, something Nepal's diaspora is already doing.
We are sending 550 cylinders from Oman, and we already purchased about 200 oxygen concentration from China, and they will be in Nepal very soon, within less than a week.
Toronto nurse Chiranjeevi Gimra has set up a GoFundMe page to rally Nepalese Canadians to help buy more oxygen and PPE. Back home, his brother is also on the front line as a doctor. His parents have mild symptoms, but in Nepal, they're not deemed sick enough to get tested for the virus. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Coming up, a key Republican booted out and the push to keep Donald Trump in the spotlight. Tonight, the future of the Republican Party in the U.S. is in question. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, the daughter of a former vice president, was booted out of the number 3 position. Her own party turned on her for blasting Donald Trump. As Jennifer Johnson reports, it's evident that the former president is still pulling the strings.
A defiant Congresswoman Liz Cheney is still publicly blasting former President Donald Trump for spreading lies about the 2020 election and for his role in the January 6th riot at the Capitol. It has cost Cheney her leadership role in Congress, but she has no regrets.
We have to recognize what it means for the nation to have a former president who has not conceded and who continues to suggest that our electoral system cannot do the will of the people.
Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called for Cheney's removal from House Conference Chair after she voted to impeach Trump on the charge of inciting the insurrection that left 5 people dead. House Republicans took a voice vote, no roll call, and in 16 minutes Cheney was replaced as some Republicans downplayed the riot.
If you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit.
The shakeup has left a shaken Republican Party, those still supporting Trump versus those who want their party to move away from lies and conspiracy theories.
Policy doesn't matter anymore. It literally is all your loyalty to Donald Trump. This is something that echoes a little bit out of North Korea.
Cheney's ouster and her replacement are a clear sign that Trump and his supporters aren't going away anytime soon.
I support President Trump. Voters support President Trump. He is an important voice in our Republican Party, and we look forward to working with him.
Cheney had voted for Trump's policies 92% of the time, far greater than her replacement, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Cheney says she now regrets voting for Trump in 2020 and won't make that mistake again.
I will do everything that I can to make sure he's not the nominee, and everything necessary to make sure that he never gets anywhere close to the Oval Office again.
Cheney, the daughter of powerful former Vice President Dick Cheney, knows she has her work cut out for her in stopping Trump, who many believe will be the Republican Party's 2024 nominee. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Rewiring transportation. Still ahead, can Canada get on board with the electric vehicle?
You're watching Global National.
I feel the need for speed.
That need for speed blasted into movie theaters 35 years ago. Top Gun became an instant classic and a quintessential Tom Cruise flick when it was released in 1986. A much older Maverick becomes our wingman once again this fall. The long-awaited sequel is due to be released in November. It was pushed back because of the pandemic. Over those 35 years, a lot has changed in how we get around. The world is slowly losing that loving feeling for gas-powered vehicles. Many countries are phasing out fossil-fueled cars in favor of electric. But so far, Canada has rebuffed calls to commit. Our Mike Jolet is taking a look at the future of electric. Mike?
Robin, there's an impression here in Canada that we're fairly forward-thinking on issues like the environment. I certainly thought so. Consider how we're bombarded on a daily basis with ads for electric vehicles. That means we're buying them, right?
It wasn't so long ago Lion Bus in Saint-Jérôme, Quebec was part of the problem. Founded in 2008, it built school buses and trucks powered by diesel engines. By 2015, its founder Marc Bedard had had enough, and he converted his entire line to electric. It was a calculated risk, but he didn't want to be left behind as the world's transportation sector was being rewired.
What we were saying at Lion is that if we don't do it now, at some point it's going to be too late. And then the people were saying, well, yeah, but is it too early? Say, well, maybe 10 years ago, it was too early.
His move paid off. He's recently inked deals with Amazon and IKEA, taken his company public and begun expansion into the U.S. The electric revolution is gaining momentum, but Canadian consumers aren't exactly humming the same electric tune as Bedard. 3.5% of all new vehicles sold in Canada are EVs, but that's small compared to the UK, France, and Germany.
We're certainly behind some other countries, like Norway is the leader in the world in terms of a heavily electrified fleet. But the whole world is behind where we need to be to decarbonize our vehicle technologies and to decarbonize our whole transportation fleet.
So what can we do to catch up? Windsor MP Brian Massey has been pushing for the federal government to be more aggressive with Canada's electric conversion. He wants to see more charging stations, but more than anything, he'd like to see the government invest in Canadian companies looking to be leaders in EV technology.
I don't like the strategies of waiting around and figuring it out later on or leaving it to others.
Specifically what he's talking about are batteries. We may not have a Tesla or one of the big three, Ford, Chrysler, or GM, to lead our homegrown manufacturing sector. They're all American companies after all. But what we do have is an abundance of the materials that go into the manufacturing of batteries, specifically lithium. And this is a member of the NDP, a party very cautious about environmental issues, saying for us to get a permanent seat at the EV table, we need to get into mining. Robin?
Mike Drolet in Toronto. Thanks, Mike. When we hear stories about cats and coyotes, they usually end badly for the cat. But a coyote in BC didn't have a chance against his feline foe. Patrol officers recorded this fearless kitty chasing a coyote. The cat was victorious, running the canine right out of the parking lot. And according to police, this is not being cliche, the cat came back the very next day. Up next, burnt out and time to quit? You're not alone. We'll explain when Global National returns. Whether it's working from home or taking on a bigger workload, employees have been going through some tough changes during this pandemic. The end is starting to come into view. And for many burnt-out Canadians, they're realizing they may not want to work at all. As our business correspondent Anne Gaviola explains, Canada may be on the cusp of a resignation boom.
Was really burnt out.
In the fall, Karen Gladenbar embarked on what she calls a midlife gap year to take a break from her family's tech company.
To not have a planned out week or a planned out month was really scary at first because I'm so used to juggling so many things and being busy.
Employment experts say there are scores of people across Canada who want to leave the workforce because they're burnt out, need to care for family, or want to make a career change. They've been waiting and thinking about their exit.
The pandemic has caused a lot of individuals to really become introspective and reflective with respect to not only all aspects of their lives, but certainly with respect to work.
According to Statistics Canada, 130,000 people have opted to leave the labor force altogether since February 2020, meaning they're not working and not looking for work, and their ranks could swell over the coming months. Williams advises employers to clearly communicate what work will look like along with expectations as the next normal begins. Flexibility can go a long way to keeping employees. And so can a focus on workplace culture, which has in many cases suffered during the pandemic.
Just a little bit on ecosystem.
And for employees planning to hand in their resignation, not burning bridges is important for future career prospects. You never know when you might cross paths with a former colleague or boss, and how you resign is just as important as why you're leaving.
Don't send an email or a text. We still should have that face-to-face interaction, be it if it can only be by a video conference, so be it. But you want to show the respect.
Although recruiters may not penalize a career gap during the pandemic the way they might under normal circumstances, Williams suggests having a solid explanation for why you took time out.
By being more available to my kids and my family, I was able to find little pockets of time to really get to know them and for them to get to know me that weren't planned or orchestrated. So that was probably the biggest reward.
Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Robin Gill. We leave you tonight with a wish come true. 21-year-old Romina Asrani has Down syndrome, but she always dreamed of driving a train. Well, today was that day. With the help of Sick Kids Hospital, Romina got her hands on the controls during a special tour at Toronto's Union Station. Thank you for watching. Donna Friesen will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I'll see you next weekend. Have a great night.